It is often said that age is just a number. But what could be the net effect of this proposition in the context of our country's elective politics? On today's edition of Focus on Parliament, we discuss the looming generational clash in Parliament as the young cohort of politicians seek to unseat their older counterparts. Welcome to the program. I am Kwagala, your host. Joining me is a panel of distinguished personalities whom I now have the honor and the pleasure to introduce to you, our esteemed viewers. Let me begin from my immediate left is Professor Mwambutsya Ndebesa, an eminent academic and a renowned political commentator. Prof, it's a pleasure to have you this morning. Say hello to the viewers.
Well, good morning to the viewers out there. Glad to be here in this space again to deliberate on issues of governance and national importance.
It's always a pleasure to have you, Professor. Next to Professor is the lady, very clad, smartly dressed in red. That should mean something, given the season. Miss Sheilah Amaniyo Dravile. She's a member of the Opposition National Unity Platform and an MP hopeful for Mukono District. It's a pleasure to have you, Sheilah. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you for having me. I think this is my second time. And good morning, viewers. I'm excited and looking forward to voice out our issues as the youthful leaders of tomorrow, and to also paint this country red, because there's something that is alarming and we need to speak about it today and now. Thank you.
Alarming.
Only alarming or alarmingly yellow?
Many thanks for joining us, Sheilah. Next to Sheilah is Ndogo Timothy Chemonges. Timothy has been quite lost, but we are glad that he's back on the program. He's a regular on this platform. Timothy is the Executive Director of the Center for Policy Analysis and the Parliament Watch. Ndogo, it's a pleasure to have you this morning. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you so much, and good morning to the panelists, good morning to the viewers. Glad to be here, and looking forward to a very fruitful discussion dissecting the cross-generational discussions. Thank you.
Many thanks indeed, Tim, for joining us. And of course, last but not least, is Dr. Tolit Charles Atiya, a specialist in the sphere of governance and a political economy researcher. Dr. Tolit is also the Associate Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance. Doc, it's a pleasure to have you today. Say hello to the viewers.
Yes, good morning, viewers. It's pleasant to be here, and pleasant to know that we're going to talk about the youth who constitute. Actually, the demographics is very interesting. You would ask yourself, who should be, if you're looking at it in terms of agency, you'd be asking yourself, who should be the leaders for countries like Uganda and even Africa as a whole, because it's on record that we have the youngest population in the world. Uganda has about 75% of its population under 25 years, and probably close to 80% under 16 years. Very interesting demographics.
Thank you, Dr. Tolit, for joining us. Dr. Tolit has just underscored the significance and relevance of today's conversation. But, Doctor, in about 2 minutes, before I move on to Timothy to elaborate for us the baseline aspects of this conversation, I just want to ask a brief question. Is there a correlation between political performance and age? Just briefly.
Well, if you look at it in terms of political economy, there is a correlation. Why? Policies are the vehicles that deliver political programs. and policies should be costed. The question that remains begging is then, who are the protagonists at defining policy, shaping it, and funding it? If you look succinctly at our leadership, what would you call it? Shape, onogram, you find that it is lean, it's lean, but dominant of the aged. This same category of people have both political power and economic power. So it is safe to conclude that they actually both influence and preponderate the dominant, what ought to be the dominant view, or what is seen as the dominant view. While below, you have a large, obese-like population that is young and with very little evidence that they actually participate in shaping policy. So you end up with you end up with a diagram that is a kinked, what you call a kinked triangle. That you see a triangle sits on a large base. But then a kinked triangle is the one you turn it upside down.
On the tip.
So we are seated, our policies are seated on the tip. The process of conception, development, funding is all held by a very narrow base. Whereas the wider bit that they impact is seated at, now sits at the top. So and it's not, you don't need a college diploma to understand that that is a weak structure. So yes, there is a correlation. And in terms of impact, you realize that once it begins to cascade, it gets very weak and loses traction. And that's the nature of our policies. That our policies, in terms of legislature or policy outcomes, they look strong. But once they begin to trickle for implementation, like for instance, you look at a policy, if you tracked a policy, look at, say, an environmental policy. By the time you are implementing it at a sub-county, it is gone.
Yeah.
And yet, 75% of the population, who are young people, are down there. So there is a correlation between politics and age.
Thank you, Doctor, for that perspective. Timothy, building on Doctor's perspective, that question was very deliberate because I want us to have a very good understanding of the practical realities of our nation's political participation and engagement. You are an observer of parliamentary political processes, seated at a very vantage point where you oversee everything. What is your sense of this generational clash in leadership in Parliament?
So in 2021, when the 11th Parliament had just started, so we took time to do a proper study in terms of age, education, gender, and all these components. And as of 2021, in terms of age, the median age was around 46 years. Now they should be around 50 years. But those between 79 years of age and around 83. There is 0.2%, very minimal percentage. 74 to around 78 was 1.5%, 1.7%. 69 to 73 was 2%. So literally you find that those between 54 years and 83 years, literally around 20%. 20% between 50 and 83. They're around 20%. Majority of the members of parliament were between 46 years and 46 years and 50 years. Now, those between 24 and 28 years, we had at least 8 MPs. Between 29 and 33 years, we had 31 members of parliament, and between 34 and 38, we had 65 MPs. Of course, it's 4 years, so each of these figures you add 4 years. Now, the recent UBOS statistics indicates that the median age, an average Ugandan, is around 16 years. An average Ugandan is around 16 years. And the expectation is if they're in school, they should be maybe in their A level or now proceeding towards the higher education. Could be technical or university at that. And so the question of leadership and having leaders who not only represent the aspirations of the majority of the population becomes paramount. Two, it's also to look at the structure of the system and how things are allow for representation of the young people to actually materialize. I think as you look today, there is definitely fundamental challenge in terms of whether whether young people can overcome the structural challenges or even financial to even get there. Because it is true there are quite a number of young leaders who would want to, aspire, even present themselves, but given the system, given the structure, given it does not allow you to go through that. But it's the reality anyway. Are those who the system advantages, are they willing to cede some power? Definitely no. At any point, they'll even want to solidify that to ensure that the available space for competitors, probably the younger people, to come into the space is constrained. Today, you've seen, for example, let's say having, let alone even the MP position. I've seen some young people saying they want to come for presidential campaign.
Yes.
Which through the threshold you may of age you may qualify, but in terms of the resources, in terms of the networks on ground, in terms of the time and mobilization capacity, it's extremely hard for you to actually think that you can be able to go through that kind of system. Of course, the younger people, probably, it's good that there's definitely the desire. Can the system allow young people to come and take over some of this position? I think definitely no. Definitely, and part of the things that are triggering this discussion is some of the images that we've seen and the viewers could have seen of the General Moses Ali, Rebecca Litwakandaga, the former speaker, and many of those. These are members who have been in these spaces, and they seem not to be shaking.
Not the president?
The president is at the core of this discussion, really. He's at the core, and he seems to be...
Because he's been at it for 40 years.
Yeah, and he seems to be still wanting to push further.
At 80 years.
At 80 years. So, again, I think beyond even the representation, I think that something that we may also want to reflect on is whether there is sufficient space for our senior colleagues, the senior generations, to transition. What could be the fears? Because definitely, I think that for most of the of the senior leaders, part of the reason as to why they would fear to transition is because there has to be a definite mechanism in which, as a society, we facilitate that transition. I don't know what the fears, for example, of the president could be, but my suspicion would be maybe the kind of approach and attitude that the next leadership would have over some of the things or approach his leadership has undertaken. So there's need for sense of security to ensure that as leaders transition, definitely there's a sense of security, but also there's a sense in which again, if, for example, if we look at General Moses Ali, at least the pictures that we see, we may not have the details in terms of his health conditions, but what we see from the image, you see a person who is frail, someone who is elderly, and a bit does not have full control of himself. And to that end, whereas it's true that the ultimate decision lies with the people, and definitely they will decide, I think if you look at what the Constitution provides in terms of the qualifications of leaders, and even those and even the parameters upon which a leader could be removed from office or otherwise, one would be their state of health, again, which of course can only be proved by having proper medical reports in terms of an individual's state. But at least from what we see, you see that there's a definite concern in terms of kind of leadership. But do the people indeed see of a specific constituency? Do they see, because ultimately it lies with them, do they see their aspirations their needs being represented by the leader? Definitely, I think that is responded by the ballot. But also, lastly, I also should say that there has been a significant adulteration of the roles of these leaders, because as we speak today, a member of parliament who ideally, to determine his success or her success, would be on the constitutional parameters, which are clearly provided there. But far from it, that is the list of the mark sheet that the constituents use to determine whether they come back or not. Most of the MPs that I've had an engagement with, many of them are actually very concerned in terms of the response they are getting from the ground, at least those that are engaged. And my suspicion is the attrition rate may slightly go higher. Now, to that end, if you try to assess their performance on in parliament in terms of, all this passing of laws, budgeting and the rest, they could have performed well, but the ground's parameters are totally different. In fact, you can have a member of parliament elected and decide never to come to parliament and decides to only focus on ground, to do and engage the constituents, identify resources here, and he will definitely become a darling to the people. So there is that, but I think understanding that our focus is on the generational clash between the older and the people, because if we're only looking at the elected leaders, there's a broader conversation in terms of younger people, even in the professional line of duty, where there is definite concern in terms of the senior citizens seem not to be shaking.
They are welcome,
and they are seeking for more extension, and it's cross-cutting. So the younger people are looking at the challenges of employment, looking at the increasing number of the educated younger people who seem not to see hope in accessing some of these jobs, which they think that the older people are taking some of the position ideally they should. So it's both a perceptual issue, but also it's a structural issue to say that once you are old, it's not that you must demonize you and you must go away. I think there should be a system, because definitely we need the senior citizens. They still have a critical role in which they can contribute to this governance structure of ours. Yeah.
Thank you, Tim, for your insights. Sheilah, you are a member of the opposition National Unity Platform, a party that has enjoyed unprecedented success, especially with the young people. You are majorly supported by the young folks in the country. Do you feel that you represent a generational mandate or shift in our country's politics? Is that your cause?
Of course, this is our cause, starting from our president, who's young, energetic, and he's encouraging every young person to come and take up these leadership positions and saying the time is now. And I also believe in that cause. The time is now. You see, the first speaker said policy is the one that moves. He said policy.
It's the vehicle for political programs.
It's policy is what moves certain programs. Now, deliberately, these old people do not understand the issues of the young people. And everyone here has said the demographics the demographics are very clear. 78% of our population is made up of young people. Where are we represented? Where are our views being heard? Who is actually being deliberate about answering the issues of young people? Unemployment, the education system that is deteriorating every day, access to health, access to so many things, even access to some of the services that the government is putting there, like programs for accessing funds. Just the restrictions, the requirements for accessing that money. As a young person, you may not be able to get it. You see, we may be looking at young people here in the city, but outside in the outskirts, the people that I represent are actually, they cease to be Ugandans, and nobody is addressing their issues. I mean, the minimum wage bill to give young people a decent pay. So young people are disillusioned. They don't seem to see themselves addressed in some of the programs that the government is doing, or in governance generally, in governance in totality. So we are saying, let us come and fill these spaces and speak to things that concern our generation, since we make up the biggest composition in this country. As simple as that. But there's no room. There's no room. They have dominated it. They have monetized the space, you know. So for a young person to come, for example, the youth elections now, minimum budget, youth elections, minimum budget is around 200 million. I think you may have to host some young people and they tell you what they're suffering just to participating in just that election. And this frustration is also coming in from the so-called godfathers, you know, people who are funding the youth, because opposition cannot engage in that youth election. They have ring-fenced it. The ruling party has ring-fenced it. So if your godfather, for example, that one, the 80-year-old says, we want so-and-so, they are going to finance that person. The person of the opposition is not going to, because they don't have the financial muscle, but they are coming to actually to participate, but their grounds are not leveled. So you're pushing out people that may come to create and impact and make a contribution in terms of policy, not just to fill spaces, you know. So that's the change we want to bring people who are going to impact.
Speaking of the impact, you are led by a young man, the Honorable Kwagala. In Parliament, your captain is a young man, Honorable Joel Senyonyi. But there is significant criticism from some quarters that you are not as effective in terms of leadership, owing to a variety of factors. Could be experience, could be some of the alternative policy positions that you are fronting. How do you respond to that? Because the electorate, then they want confidence that you can actually replace the old guard, especially in Parliament.
I think they have really exhibited good leadership skills, despite of the fact that everyone says they have no experience. But what have the experienced people done for us? They've just taken us back, so many years back. And these young people that you say don't have experience have pushed the agenda and brought them to book, to account for everything they're supposed to do. So for me, it's they are the people who are deliberately frustrating young people who have the brains, who have the innovation, who have the ideas, because we need new ideas. The world is moving fast. We need new ideas. You cannot tell me that it's only the old folks that have the ideas. So for me, the LOP, Honorable Senyonyi, has done his part so well by keeping the government accountable. And everything that he has spoken has been factual. I don't know why we do not critique him on facts, other than, is it because he's being bold that he's calling out some of these issues and you're calling him incompetent? You know, this issue is also cutting across to the corporate world. So many young people cannot qualify because they're saying they don't have experience. But when are they going to have the experience? They need to fill those spaces for you to have a feel. You cannot know someone's capability until you test them. So until Joel was tested, until NUP came out to be tested, everyone has appreciated that young people can do something. And the results can speak for themselves. I don't know why don't those people follow it up with facts? Where has he failed? Where has he failed? Fighting for human rights for people? Refusing to accept the amendment of the UPDF Act? Or is it questioning the budget that he's critiquing? Where are we misusing money? Where are we misallocating money here and there? Why isn't the budget speaking to the needs of the young people? You know, when you look at other countries' budgets, you see the element and the component, and you see how it's going to directly trickle down. But in our budget, that is not being seen. So you're saying PDM, but how has it been impactful? Why don't we now allow the young people who have the solutions to come and actually participate? But now you're frustrating the process, even in the youth elections where you have created space for the youth, you have come and frustrated that process. It is actually just, the youth positions are just by name. They're not even financed, you know, they can't operate. And then the spaces for he mentioned that there's no transition for the old people, but they are there. They created spaces for old people to go and occupy those spaces. Yeah, special. Now they're MPs for the elderly, aren't they there? They should now move and be able. I think they're not prepared. And now it's a jungle. We have to also fight. Young people have to also come out and fight and say, no, we have to occupy these spaces.
Thank you, Sheilah.
But the issue of the money monetarization of politics is, that's where we are stuck. That's where the clash is, you know, because you can't fight someone who has money. It's a bit difficult. Practically speaking, like you said, it's as much as we want to express interest, when you come to the practicability of it, it's very difficult. You have to for example, I take over 702 villages. I need 5 agents. Multiply that by 20,000 at my age. Where do I get the money from?
Thank you for your views, Sheilah. Professor, the issue of the generational contestation in our country's politics, let us now broaden it across the base. Your counterparts, owing to your status as a senior citizen, are being pushed out by the young generation. We seem to have consensus that the demographics clearly indicate that, and the young people are quite disillusioned. What does this portend for our country's governance outlook?
Thank you, but I don't think the old ones are being pushed out. Let me be allowed to use the Marxist language. I think that the youth are a force, or they are a class, a social class, a social category, class in themselves, but not for themselves. They are a class in themselves because they are about 30%, I think now, but they are not a social class for themselves.
About 70%, more than.
No, they are just 30%. The other ones are young people. We are talking about the youth now, those who are between the ages of maybe 17 to 30 or something. Those are about 30%. So, they may be youth physically, biologically, But I think their ideas are not mature. They have not yet matured.
Prof, that's an indictment.
No, I'm going to elaborate. I'm going to elaborate.
That's an indictment.
You might be having old heads on young shoulders. And I'm going to elaborate. What my colleagues and everybody has been saying is that the youth have been peripherized. Economic periphery, social periphery, political periphery, justice periphery. And why haven't they leveraged their numerical strengths to come to the table, to come to the center? Let me use the center periphery analysis. Why haven't they? And I will elaborate more. When you talk about, no pun intended, about Moses Ali, his age and maybe incapacity to be able to represent the majority of the people there, because even in his constituency, the majority are the youth. It is the youth who will defend him. It is, they have already, I saw it in the papers, they defended him. When you talk about corruption of these elderly, old people in the government and the government generally, it is the youth who will defend government. You see what I mean by still being old, having old heads on young shoulders? Tribalism is one of the challenges this country has. When you try to bring out issues of, for example, fiscal discipline or fiscal indiscipline, like I think Honorable Ibrahim Nganda has been bringing out, it is the youth who will bring him down. They will not support him. They will not give him support because he's not very old, but also that idea is good, but they will not support him. They are more stuck in the past than in the present. When you talk about school dropout, there are very high school dropout rates in Uganda. I think some people have figures. Yeah, those who begin, like, they can say 7 million, but by the time they go to university or high school, they are less than 500,000.
Like the girls at P7, there is parity, which means there is almost 100% girls, looking at the proportion of the population of girls at that age to P7, and the boys also. But by the time they get to senior 4, which is just 4 years after, 55% of the girls would have dropped. They don't proceed to secondary school, and the same.
So you can see this inequality, social inequality, the issues of social justice. The youth have not become a youth for themselves. They are a youth in themselves, but not for themselves. They are still stuck in old traditional value systems, not modern traditional value systems. If you go to Makerere University and you go to the dean's office, you find the youth, most of the youth are going there to register associations of tribes. Not national, not nationwide associations. They are stuck in that. They have not become of, you see, it is claimed, she almost claimed that they have new ideas, revolutionary ideas. They don't. They should be having ideas around, civic ideas around issues of equality, issues of liberty, issues of inclusion, issues of unity in diversity. And if they acquired these new revolutionary ideas, they would be able to overturn these aged ones who are dominating them. But you know, when you bring principle-driven issues of equality, regional equality, for example, now, look at regional spatial equality. There are regions with 60% multidimensional poverty, others are around 3%, 10%. When you bring these ones out, the youth will not support you. They will just go around as if they are saying is in a dry season. They are not fixing their strategies and what they want around civic values of equality, of social justice, of inclusion, of diversity, of pluralism. If the youth would be going for civic values that I'm talking about, they would be a youth for themselves. Let them overcome these identities and look at class, the class question. Class question here, I'm talking about economic class question. Almost like the Nairobi people have. If they were looking at that one and organizationally, you know, they will not be easily organized to achieve what they are achieving, as she's pointing out. They will not have Kwebe Ramu until they have got organizational logistical capacity. How will they get it? They have to discard these old values, value systems of tribalism, of regionalism, of religiosity, and things like that, and embrace civic values. So if they were saying, whether you are a Samia, whether you are a Muchiga, whether you are a Karamajong, a Muganda, an Acholi, or whatever, what unites you, what you share in common, the commonly shared values is equality. Today, they would go to parliament and make a difference. What they are doing now, the gentleman, the honorable Timothy here has said that the majority again are young people. Yeah, but they are young, but they are not for themselves. They support values of the old order.
But
Prof,
okay.
We don't have a new
Isaac,
order.
if you may allow for me to just probe that a little further. Prof, just how do they then get out of this? Because if you take Timothy's thesis of structural defranchisement, I would like to invite you to look at, say for instance, the alterations in our educational or school syllabus. I remember when I was in O-level, I studied a subject called political education, which is no longer there. And that subject would give you an insight into elements of nationalism, the value systems of nationalism. Because when they would introduce people like Ignatius Musazi, and you know, there are a lot, and what the Obotes, and what they took on as young people then, but with national interest or outlook. But today, look at what we look at what we're reading. So there is, yes, there is a question. You probably right to point out that the youth find themselves in this hopeless situation. But the question would be, don't you think it has been deliberate?
Yeah, it has been deliberate.
And the fact that it is deliberate, then do we still go ahead to lumpen the youth, or we try to further problematize it like I'm trying to do, and then also begin to seek solutions from the other side of the divide? Because the youth now probably he's tied up, you know, he's grown up as completely unconscious. This even further to this, go to the national election, go to the elections, periodic elections that we are having. If you look at the budget of the Electoral Commission, one of the most or least funded areas, so to speak, is civic education. Look at the youth election the other day. I kept following it on radio, and I was amazed at the fact that in one constituency they were saying they were using a roster which is handwritten. So I kept saying, how did they get to this day without a roster? And EC is saying it is ready.
So, earlier on, you talked about agential issues.
Yes.
And he talked about structural issues. And I'm talking about ideational issues.
Okay, all right.
I'm talking about the ideas
The ideation, yes.
that they have to overcome. They have to overcome this mental slavery, if I might put it.
Okay.
You have to have new ideas, not continue with the new ideas in the old bottles. And then they organize to overcome their predicament. So they have not become conscious of their peripherizing. Now, for example, the government even provided a space called the National Youth Council or the Youth Council.
Which is not funded.
Before it is funded.
How do you expect
Wait. Actually, I am going to put the question back to you. Why haven't they demanded for its funding as a bargaining chip? They say, we the youth will not vote you unless you take up this agenda and fund the National Youth Council. But for them, when they go there, they struggle in order to become MPs next time. Yeah. They use the space to be at an individual level to be in parliament. Why don't they have a youth agenda and say, NRM, nope, we have a youth agenda and we are coming to elections. We want the youth agenda to be incorporated in your manifesto. And at the end of the 5-year period, we shall demand from you how you have implemented our manifesto. If you not have implemented our manifesto, if you are in government and you are NRM, we are going to NOOP. But they will not go to NOOP because they are stuck. They say, me, NRM was born into me. That's an old idea. Or I am in NOOP and I will die in NOOP. It is in my blood. No, it is not in your blood. It is socially constructed. It is in your mind. It can be shifted. So I think the youth, ideationary, in terms of ideas, yes, are older, are stuck to the old ancient.
So conversely, does that mean that the older generation is young?
No,
Ideally?
No. For them, they might be old, but they know how to keep you down.
They're in sync.
Okay.
They know how to keep you down. For you, you don't know how to bring yourself from the periphery to the center. So the point I am making is that the youth should first understand ideationally. They should first understand how they are peripherized. In which ways are they peripherized? And after they have understood it, then they find ways and tactics and strategies of being centralized, of coming to the center. But if they keep with the old methods, with the old ideas, and lamenting, they will not come to the center. Those at the center will keep them outside. In other words, they should overcome these traditional ideas of ndiwa this tribe, ndi mwana wani, ndi mwana wagundi, I come from this region, I come from this one. They will continue peripherizing you. They will continue peripherizing you if you do not begin to stand on the politics which are based on issues, principle-led, principle-based, principle-driven politics. Ensonga, let me use my Uganda, which is still in nursery. Is there ensonga? Now, Noop, she's from Noop, and I've seen posters all over Kampala. There is almost nobody who is using the slogan of people power. They stood on people power, but they have forgotten people power. They are now talking about themselves, how they are good, how they are nice, how the president is nice, and things like that. They should stick on the principle-driven people power, meaning the power should come from the state to the people, citizens' power. I think it is a question of understanding and a question of ideas, so it is an ideational challenge.
I think Prof totally misunderstands youth. Totally misunderstands youth.
When you return from the break,
no,
I'll allow you to
cannot wait. Honestly,
It's okay.
and this is where we are stuck as youth. This is where we are stuck as youth.
And you
They are
continue stuck there unless
No,
you become revolutionary.
you are the reason why the youth are where they are. And when the youth try to speak out, you know what happens.
What happens?
Of course, you round us up, you arrest people, you don't even listen
Why
to
do
the
they
youth.
run here up and you keep
Even
quiet?
that youth council, let me tell
Why?
you, they put the demands there. But your government knows how to table things up there. They receive them very well. I can assure you people have
And
evidence.
you go home?
You have not given space
Who
for
gave
these issues
who
to
gave
be
space
raised
the
and
French
addressed.
Revolution to remove King Louis?
For example, let me talk about the
Who?
issue of the civic issue.
Who gives space
This
for the
government,
revolutionaries
this
in France
government
to
has
remove
frustrated
the
youth
king?
from getting registered national IDs, an instrument that is going to enable them go and vote. Many youth are struggling. Why? Because they don't support the government. The GISOs, the DISOs, the WHOs. You have to go and get a recommendation from them so that you get a national ID. And once you don't have that, you're dropped. That recently concluded youth elections, they dropped names out of the registers deliberately.
And then?
What do you expect them to do?
Excellent reflections.
Focus
on Parliament takes a short break.
And
We'll see
you
you
have
back. Do
created
stay
this
with us.
environment for the youth, and that is where they are stuck here, and that is where the youth are. We are still people power, by the way. Prof, we are still people power, just that now the mission is protest. We are protesting. As people power, we're going to protest the status quo, and we are tired. We are tired of the state that we are in. Thank you very much.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back. You are watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV. I am Isaac Kwagala, your host. In this segment, we continue discussing the generational contestation and struggle between the young crop of the politicians and their older counterparts in the context of our country's politics. Timothy, let me engage you first in this segment. We left it at a point of sharp and intense debate between Professor and Sheilah, but you had something to say. Let me allow you an opportunity to respond briefly to that.
Yeah, so thank you so much. So I thought I would invite Professor to the line of thinking around why young people really do what they do. So it is true that among the people who actually elect support in decision making of the older people include the young people. But also it is true that the biggest people who are victims of this system are the young people.
True.
So understanding that young people are also seeking to get out of the kind of system. I for one am not in support of unconstitutional and the resistance as a mechanism if there's an option of engagement. If there's an option of young people engaging and working within the framework to realize what Prof calls equity or nation, some statehood or
National identity.
National identity.
Not tribal identities.
If that option is there, it serves the rest of us.
Timothy, is that viable or tenable given the current political context?
You see, Isaac, where we are at today as a country, we are not only divided in the lines of tribal, which is a reality, but the social breakdown in this country is real. And that as a country, if we are not careful, most likely, we are likely to take the South. In fact, I've seen some studies which seem to indicate that not so far from now, if certain measures are not put in place as a country, we are likely to get into a crisis. Now, because we are, the distance between us where we are at today and the crisis, it's not so long, at least according to some theories, then there is need for us to put in place some measures to ensure that we address this. In fact, in a time of crisis, the biggest beneficiaries would be probably the older fellas. The biggest victims could be the young people, but the country will lose. And so there is need for an option where we can deliberately engage. It is true that the system as it's structured today may not allow for young people to equitably
to emerge, to come from the peripheral to the center.
To come to the peripheral to the center. But there is an opportunity, and I think for us who get the platforms of this nature is to understand the reality, but also provide the options available to whoever would want to listen. So the young people, for example, I think, and the system is like a car, where you have the driver locking the door and blames the passengers for not getting out. And yet, it's desirable that you get out, but you know, there is when Prof says that challenges us and says, why is money being removed from the National Youth Council, yet you are the majority? Why are they arresting you, yet you are the majority? Why are you? So, for example, General Moses Hali in his constituency, most likely you have young people again who would form the bigger number of the electorate. Why are you electing? And my question to Prof is: are the young people that are participating in that process civically aware? Are they doing it freely?
Can they be civically aware? That's the point I was making.
Absolutely. But also, you see, we are running a system of tokenism. We are running a system of patronage as a reality. Now, the young people are saying, guys, there is need for us to step back and reflect on the challenges that we are at hand. The reality is that if we are to operate in the system as it is today, most likely young people will not get opportunities. Yet we do not see ourselves in the people that are in these positions. Our needs, our aspirations, and where we would want to be, or the little that we would want to contribute, may not necessarily be materialized with the kind of system and structure we have today. Prof challenged us again and said, you have a younger parliament, and maybe you have a bigger number of MPs who are younger.
Yeah.
Why are they choosing to elect and vote in some of the bills that actually disfavor the young people?
Exactly.
Because you see,
that's the point I'm making.
I'll tell you, even in Parliament, by the way, let alone the issue of young people, there have been motions, there have been proposals of laws in Parliament that that are aimed at addressing the question of gender parity. Sometimes the perception is that the women in Parliament will support this. You will actually be shocked that there are some laws that ideally are in favor of women, but you have the women members of Parliament actually not voting. They step back. So I think, like, looking at the structure in Parliament and how the system, but also how decision making is reached at, it would be unfair to blame the young people for why some bills are passing. Because you see, you must understand the system and how the structure of decision making looks like.
Can I give a small rejoinder? Zohran Mamdani, the son of Muhammad Mamdani, who was born in Uganda, he's 33 years. He was born in Uganda. He left Uganda when he was 5 years. He went to South Africa. Then he went to the USA. Zohran Mamdani is 33 years. He has won the primaries of democratic elections in New York State.
Because
Listen. In America, in USA, there is racism. There is a racial system. Muhammad Mamdani is an Indian of Ugandan origin. He has broken the ceiling in a racial system in New York.
So thank you, Prof, for that. For me again, and I think before we go to the next panelist, is to say that sometimes power does not only yield to to resources. It also yields to access and opportunity. I mean, using Mamdan as an example of how successful a young person can be may be an
And an Indian of Ugandan origin.
Looking at a Ugandan, for example, look at a young person. We've seen, and we could use an example, and maybe the discussion would be having is how do we address the challenge we have at heart?
Exactly.
Now,
embrace civic
which is
values.
That the old guard has overstayed. Okay, how do we get them out?
I mean, that's a discussion that would
that seems to be the exact challenge.
Are they willing to move? I mean, there's been the proposal of resistance, and we need to put up a bit of resistance here. And
the clash in perspective that we have, do we force them out? Do we cooperate with them and negotiate a settlement? What do we do?
All that has been done. All the negotiations, the cooperation, and dialogue, everything has been done. But they have refused to move. They have refused to move.
President Museveni has been in power for
40 years.
Now,
as long as the young people's ideas are stuck in tribalism, the old will remain.
Yeah,
overcome tribalism, and you'll see whether the old ones will not listen.
So definitely that could be an option that, as Prof suggests. But I think that it is true that there is a problem that we are dealing with. There is a voice of young people who need to be heard, but also there is need to explore non-violent options that do not necessarily replace the country, because we are already dealing with a lot. We are already dealing with a lot as a country. The young people that you see, they lack the employment and the challenges that so you see, it's like asking, so why are you employed and you are the majority? You look for jobs. You go to the offices. So I think that the discussion is in terms of what do we do in terms of the challenges that we have. Is resistance the best option? I think no. As a country, looking at the options, looking at the systemic challenges that are there, and collectively thinking on how we address them.
Interesting viewpoints. Doctor, we seem to be presented with a serious dilemma as a country.
There is also poverty, by the way. It's not only age.
We are at crossroads, but I know you are monitoring political trends at the Center for Constitutional Governance. We are about to enter into the thick and heat of the 2026 general election cycle. What do you think when you read the trends? Where do the inclinations lie? Are there leanings to the older guard or to the young generation in terms of the leadership contest?
Oh, well, that is an interesting question, Isaac. From our vantage point, and particularly from where I see it, and I want to share maybe an experience that is a little private, but just in a summarized way. I have actually been away attending to a sick child, and I'm not really a young person, because this boy is a third-year student of architecture at Chemonges University, and he's been ailing for a while, and we've been struggling with this, and the experiences in the hospitals clearly showed me that there doesn't seem to be organization in the country, in the very sense of the word. So, borrowing from that, when I look back, I want to ask myself two questions, which I'll try to answer. One is, we are now living in a multi-party dispensational system, where arguably we would rely on the parties to be able to champion the varied ideas of the people. And this, hopefully, that they are anchored within certain philosophies. comparatively, if you look at the West, whether Europe or North America, you find that their politics has grown to an extent where they seem to have situated the context and framed the issues. So, you know, there are now categorizations that are familiar. The language is familiar. If they are talking about those in the left, those in the right, in Europe, in the recent political turbulence, we have seen they seem to be emerging, because you know that many of these governments, whether Spain, Italy, Britain has had several prime ministers, the Norwegian countries, they seem to be a movement where it's no longer just the left or the right. They now seem to be center left,
And right.
center right, you know. So why am I alluding to this? It shows that there seem to be some nuances in the contestation of ideas. In the past, it was, you know, liberal democracy, liberalism, and you know, the philosophies of the John Locke's and all that, and now that is being challenged with new factors. There are now issues of the environment. There is now climate. There is migration. You know, so these are shaping. It would be definitely exciting to see that some of these things are happening here with our politics. But like Professor Ndebesa correctly points out, when you try to background and contextualize and therefore frame our political outlook, and you take the parties, it is very difficult, for instance, to say this particular party stands for this. This particular party is moving towards this direction. Our parties seem to be caught up in what you do refer to as sloganeering. There is more sloganeering. We are hearing a lot of noise, but with almost no message. And even the NRM that has enjoyed stay of tenure for 40 years, if you took any random sample of even the people standing for the NRM seats today, in spite of their domination, and asked, what are your issues? For instance, if their captain is to be aped, and which happens oftentimes, you see somehow what he idealizes is sort of picked and reverberated over time. I think there are basically three slogans that have stayed with them for a while, and yet I don't seem to see the connection with our aspirations as a people. For instance, one, there is this idea that Professor Ndebesa may like, but I find it very obsolete. This idea of black, what do they call it? Black Pan-Africanism, you know. Sounds a plausible idea from thought, but I find it so far-fetched. Look at the way we are having challenges just with the East Africa community alone. The other thing they keep talking about, and I think that's the most abused word in all this, and that probably I would also want to agree with Professor Ndebesa on that, this whole idea of a revolution. I think revolutions are, a revolution by the way is a phenomena. And phenomena don't, one of the characteristics of phenomena is that they don't occur often. They are rare. Phenomena is not an everyday But today I hear the use of the word revolution, tulimu.
Struggle.
Tulimu struggle. So I keep
Let me
asking.
correct it. It's a true that you want change. I'm here. I'll correct you.
Tulimu
Want
struggle.
change. That struggle was no.
I am not sure.
No.
Sheila.
Our movement now is we want change and we are protesting. We are protesting.
Perhaps it keeps on evolving
We are protesting.
with the
National Unity Platform is
changing
protesting.
seasons and times.
Yeah, so
But protesting what?
I
The
am
status quo.
I am certainly, Sheila, by the way, you'll be surprised. I'm sympathetic to the. I'm anxious for a revolution. I am sympathetic with the struggle. I may not be in the struggle. I may not support the struggle, but I am sympathetic. But I think we need clarity in these things, because away from the parties and the question of whether the political parties can deliver on our current predicaments, I will tell you with with no reservation at all, that I find the political parties wanting, given the arguments I've made. The other would be election organization, the bodies. The competence of these bodies and whether they can deliver. Actually, one word I want dropped from the Electoral Commission.
Independent.
No, actually now you added the second one. For me, I'm concerned with this word boundary. Because I don't know how it was located in that agency, because they have never claimed it. The boundary formations are being made in Parliament. And by wish and whim, you see. So, Isaac, I don't see order. Now, you cannot go for any election anticipating, clear outcomes when you don't even have order at the position of formation. So, for me, I would like again to do another comparison. We witnessed the Arab Springs, and I only don't want to be tactical here to run away from the arguments. But as a researcher, and Ndebesa is here as a historian, he will tell you that the buzz around Arab Spring was dubbed the unexpected Arab Revolution, unexpected revolution. But when researchers have sat and done a postmortem, historians have looked through it, there are three key things that have emerged. One is, first of all, the Arab Spring were wrongly referred to as an Arab revolution or would-be revolution. The issues that actually preempted, motivated, carried and sustained the Arab Springs, given the speed in which they happened, given who was involved, went back and clearly anchored to democratic issues. I cannot go to all of them, but I will tell you, just like we are stuck with the Museveni edifice of 40 years, the Arab Springs combined, you look at Algeria, look at Tunisia, look at Egypt, look at Sudan, those leaders had what you'd look at as a passed on, some kind of generational mantle pushing for close to 360 years plus. So it was just a narrow base of power. Power was, subscribed to a very narrow base. And they had been there for like 360 years. So when I look at the Arab Spring and I look at what is happening in this country and I see 40 years, I begin not to lose sleep. I think maybe Sheila could be right. they could actually be in the struggle. But the struggle may not be ending soon.
But it is not well.
Thank you.
It is not well defined.
For your reflections. Sheilah, you are the politician on the platform, so I'm going to ask you quite a basic political question. Let us revisit the issue of the special interest groups representation in Parliament, where today we have youth representatives, women representatives, the elderly, the UPDF. But let us focus on the two, especially the youth and the women. What are your views as a party? Because today we are discussing the generational struggle and shift from the old guard to the new cohort of leaders. Do you think that's a sustainable of representing the minority groups in the country?
Maybe before she answers, I want to give her a case study. My woman member of parliament of Gulu has been there for 25 years and is seeking another term.
Is that better?
Better all Chan. And I'm telling you she's coming back. Because one thing, like Timothy was saying, she is at every funeral. She may not be in parliament, but she's at every funeral in the village. So we know her as our pastor.
Because she attends funerals.
So the question is, I don't know whether we still need a parliament.
So Sheilah, in light of those dynamics.
It's really challenging, and this is where we are, and this is why we are opposing and protesting the status quo as National Unity Platform, as the alternative, because we're the alternative government. We are the leaders of opposition.
The government in waiting.
Currently. A government in waiting, and we're going to get it. So, in light of the special interest group elections, oppositions.
In Parliament specifically.
In Parliament. The NRM has ring-fenced those positions. We are under state capture. Usually we say this and people take it lightly, but we are under state capture. They have ring-fenced certain positions and have barred off the rest of the participants from taking charge. The money issue, the monetarization of politics has kept us where we are. Nothing can be done and until we take out the element of money. Even when we come to participate, you will see the hand of money playing a bigger role. That underhand of money, and whether it's underhand or on the surface, it is what is making, it's what is creating the situation right now. So they are going to buy off our contenders, our leaders. They are going to, first of all, they are sort of electoral college managed elections. So that is something small for NRM. If they can give their 300 and something MPs 100 million, what about an electoral college that is of a known number? That is something small. They will get them, and this is what happens practically. They get the electoral college members, lock them in a certain hotel, bring them out on the day of voting. Yeah, are you seeing that scenario? When are the other participants going to approach them to get a vote, to come to request for the vote for them? So the system they have created is to keep themselves in power. And I don't know why Ugandans are so blind to this. It's an open book, what is happening. But people are sharing
you're
away.
not breaking down the issue. When you say they bring them, lock them in a hotel, you're making it look so decent. The thing is that they bring them, put them in some place, or what you call it a hotel, but the key thing is that they give them meat. No, you see, let me tell you, 85% of the Ugandan population is rural.
Yes.
And some of these people, in real sense, only eat meat 3 times, 4 times a year. Oftentimes, it either has to be at a political rally or a funeral. These are the issues. So maybe we would want to know from Noop how you're going to start growing extra ranches so that we can start eating more than a meal of meat.
Our role is to sensitize people, and we're sensitizing them. But the moment they realize that we are reaching the actual targets, my friend, they will take your car, they will freeze your accounts,
I know.
They will do all sorts of things to incapacitate you to go and do what you're supposed to do, which is civic education. Many a times you've seen us as a movement, as a party, trying to reach out and go and sensitize people about our party, like the rest are doing. I mean, they allow the FDC these days just because they have married them, the DP, they allow them to do whatever. Any party that they have weakened, they allow them to go and do whatever they want. But the one that is top on their list, they will make sure our activities are stopped. You know, of recent, they came and attacked our headquarters with live bullets. With live bullets. So all these hindrances and circumstances that they put us under, they curtail us from doing what we are supposed, the basic that we are supposed to do, to reach out, to talk about our agenda. We are not allowed, and yet our agenda is just we are a progressive party. We are a progressive party, and we want change. How do we bring about this change? By going and telling people about our agenda. Our agenda is to fight for human rights, and it's very obvious. We've talked about these things every day, but the counter narrative that the NRM does, they are very good at this. Oh, that's a party of hooligans. So when we come out with a slogan of protest, let's protest the status quo. All these people have gangs, they are going to go riot on the streets. No, they know what we are talking about. They know. But they have managed to now capture the media. Media nowadays is also scared to report the reality. So when I say...
The system has captured them also.
Yeah, the system has captured the media. He knows. None of them can give real-time issues. They actually fear for their lives right now.
Sheilah, my final question to you. In the event that you successfully take over state power, do you hope to maintain the special interest groups representation in parliament?
Absolutely, because we are an inclusive party. We believe in inclusion. That's why some of the things will remain, of course, like representation of people, because we are people power. Yeah, so we want everyone to come on the decision-making table for equal representation. That is acceptable. What is not acceptable is trying to interfere in the system of elections and the electioneering malpractice and rigging elections, and that is what we don't agree with. The injustices and crippling the system. We don't have a system right now. We don't. Today, Biabakama will wake up and say, verification of academic documents is now going to be done by National Council of Higher Education, as opposed to the original. Why? Because they are trying to stifle us from participating, and the ground is not leveled. It is not. No wonder they're asking them to pay money for that. And it's supposed to be a free engagement. Come, express your interest. Let's convince people, and people, will vote you in, and we have a system. We don't have a system. Oh my goodness, this is family law, a family rule. That's what it is, and that's what we are fighting as National Unity Platform. And there is militarization. And I know you will all believe there is militarization, both in the layer and in uniform. At every border stage, there is that person that is a spy, a military person. So we are under military siege, should I call it? Every ministry right now has a military figure. Every approval that goes on in government, you must be approved. Who is this? Where you attached to? Everything. They have access to our phones. They tap you. My goodness. So this is what we are fighting, and we are calling upon. This is the only window we have as Ugandans to exercise this change that we want, this revolution that we want. Let's go and protest. But it's unfortunate that the rigging has already started. It has already started.
Thank you,
They know how to. They are very good at that, but we believe in the will of the people, and we shall. You wait for what will happen.
Fingers crossed.
Things we don't have to say them on camera, but we are as much as they are ready, we are also ready.
Thank you,
Because
Sheilah,
we know
for
their
your
tricks and their game. For 40 years, we have known their game. Yes.
Thank you for your observations. Professor, you are the historian. Cast a historical sort of gaze into Uganda's future. Do you see this generational clash the likely impact on the 2026 general elections?
Thank you for that. But I think, Mr. Moderator, you phrased the question wrongly. And I think even NUP, which is in the struggle, they are framing the question wrongly. The issue is not generational. The issue is forces of privilege versus forces of social justice. That's how it should be framed. This business of the old and the young, I think, was poorly framed. I will tell you, Bubos will tell you that actually the poorest people in Uganda, who are suffering the poorest in multidimensional poverty, are people between the ages of 65 and above, isn't it? Actually, the eldest, the majority of the oldest people, of the poorest people who are suffering are the oldest, not the youngest. That is true, not so.
But that makes a smaller
So,
percentage.
no, listen, now you have to
Perhaps,
see.
Professor, they are vulnerable on account of their age.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something.
But
Yeah.
not the actual.
But let me tell you something. The people, the soldiers who are beating these Nupu people are youth. They are youth who are privileged and youth who are underprivileged. So the issue should be framed as the forces of privilege and forces of social justice. Once we frame it that, the struggle will be very clear. Not generational, not biological, but ideological. Forces of privilege and forces of social justice. So that we know the struggle is to have the forces of justice be in power and bring those social categories of people from the periphery to the center. Because if we don't frame it that way, we shall continue getting the wrong direction where you are looking at the elderly rather than looking at the elderly who are also marginalized. Just as they are privileged youth, actually the privileged youth are the ones keeping that system we are talking about, which is a system of the privilege, not the underprivileged, not the forces of social justice. So we need to have a struggle of the forces of social justice. So that, for example, now we have got the teachers. The teachers have been divided between those who can be paid 4 million and those who can be paid 1 million. Now that is not a question of age. That's a question of privileged and underprivileged. When it comes to the country, you have got one country which is glaringly poor and another country which is relatively doing very well. That's the question of power relations in terms of social privilege, of privileges and underprivileged. That is how I would want to frame the question rather than between age. Yes, we can talk about age, we can talk about even gender. We are not even talking about gender. Women, the majority of women, they are women who are socially underprivileged and there are women who are privileged. So when you just look at only gender biologically, then you will miss out the point that there are privileged women who will support the system we are talking about. Now, when it comes to, that's when the struggle will remain tribal. Because the cut across a norm or value that can bring together all Ugandans is a question of privileges, the privileged class and the privileged class. The forces of privilege and the forces of social justice. Because in every tribe, there are privileged groups. And in every region, there are socially underprivileged groups. There are people who will support the establishment. So instead of this debate about generation, it should be the establishment and the non-establishment. The periphery and the center. Who can be brought to the center? If it is framed like that, it is very easy now to push the struggle. Like the Gen Zs have pushed it. It is in class terms. They are almost forgetting whether you are Chikuyu, whether you are a Karenjini, whether you are a Luo, or whether you are a Mijikenda, or whether you are this and that, so that there is something that ties people together, that they share together in common, which is a class question. The forces of privilege and the forces of underprivilege. That is how you frame the struggle. But this struggle, if you frame it generationally, you will be beaten by the youth. They are the ones beating you, aren't they? And they are privileged youth in Uganda who will support the system. And they are old people. Not necessarily old guards. It is forces of privilege. Not necessarily old guards. I'm old. I'm not the one funding them. Am I? So please look at it in terms of. But even in power, they are youth. He has just told us, Timothy has just told us that more than 50% of members of parliament are below the age of 54, isn't it? How come?
On the executive.
Well, even on the executive, by the way. Even on the executive.
The executive, the old people take the highest percentage.
Okay, even if they take the percentage.
Ali, Kadaga.
No, the question here is privileged groups, privileged forces, and underprivileged forces. Because you find the people in parliament who have gone to parliament and are young, they belong to the privileged forces. And they are promoting privileged forces bills, interests. That's why they were given 100 million. So even if you young people from NUP go to power, if you don't frame issues around privileged people and underprivileged people, you will now take the privileges of the young people at the center, and you leave some young people at the periphery. You will leave the elderly people at the periphery. You will leave some employees at the periphery. You will leave some women at the periphery. You will leave Karamoja at the periphery. So the question is periphery-center relations. The question is privileged forces against underprivileged forces. So I would, for example, interpret the whole NRM struggle. They went to the bush. They went to the bush to fight certain people out of power, not on the ticket, not on the principle of privileged forces versus underprivileged. And now they are in privileged position. Now, finally, I want to say that if you frame issues, frame issues around human rights, you are likely not to get political support. I am going to explain to you. People are not bothered about abstract ideas like freedom of association, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, and the like. People are concerned about whether they have money for fees, whether they have money for food, whether they have transport, whether they have money for treatment, and the issues, the hospitals are there. So it is actually, to put it in a legal language, in a human rights language, we have lawyers here. The struggle should be around the socio-economic rights. I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about political rights, but political rights are far from the people's minds. People are looking at socio-economic rights. Talk about school dropout. Talk about transport. Talk about other people going to eat ribs in Sheraton and others cannot even have chikamando. Talk about people who go to South Africa and Nairobi and Germany for treatment and others cannot even get medicine in Chirudu. Talk about people who walk in the evening in Wandegea and others are driving these impenkonis. Talk about some people who have got square miles of land, others don't have even where to build their house. So it is socio-economic issues that will distinguish between the privileged forces and underprivileged forces, rather than looking at it from the generational age question. No, because if you look at it and we frame these things wrongly, they will be brought back at tribalism. You see, tribalism now. These no people are Baganda. They are fighting Banyankole. And then the other day, these actually people will say, as Mao is trying to put it, that you see it is the Baganda DP who are struggling against us, the rest, and you are bringing DP has survived in Uganda, but now it is led by people outside Uganda. Now they have got it wrong. So you have to, we have to get our framework, our analytical framework, away from social group, biological groups, and we look at the privileged class and the privileged class, but they can overlap. You may find a certain tribe is the one which is on the periphery. There they can struggle as a tribe in order also to get to the center. You may find a gender, a certain kind of gender, like the women gender, the female gender being left behind. They can struggle, but they should struggle to be at the center with the others, not leave others behind because they are only women. That is the framing. So I think the topic was shouldn't be framed in that light of old generation, young generation per se. There is a coincidence that the young generation, of course, are the ones who are on the periphery, but not all of them. They have very, very, very many privileged youth who are protecting the establishment, who are protecting the current order. Actually, they are the ones protecting the current order because they have benefited from this current order. So the framing should be different, and that is my take. If we continue framing issues on a generation, on these cultures, and the issues should be framed in civic values of a universal nature: equality, inclusiveness, liberty, yes, and things like that. But mainly focusing the struggle on privileged forces versus the social justice forces.
I must appreciate you, my panelists, Professor Ndebesa, Ms. Sheilah.
Was that the final one? Because that's okay.
Ndogu Timothy Chemonges, unless if you have something to say in a minute, you could.
No, not really. I think mine was to. I was triggered when Professor said was commenting on the discussion and
the framing.
The framing of the issue.
Because I also think that while Prof raises a fundamental problem in terms of social and the class issues, I think also the discussions around the young people vis-a-vis the different generations, because there are definite concerns in terms of how generations look at things, the challenges, the solutions, but also the aspirations in terms of where they would want to do, how they would want to do things, but also there seems also to be a fundamental problem in terms of how different generations seems to view other generations as being part of the problems that they are facing. Because again, as it's true, we are, Professor is one of the biggest champions of the nation-state
building, nation integration, national identity.
Yeah, and part of our biggest discussion that we need to have today is that what does the position of the presidency look like in terms of this direction that Professor would want us to take? Because again, as you see President Museveni today, there is a lot of unclarity in terms of how we move forward from him. Again, it could be a function of class, political, but I think there's a function of age, there's a function of generation, which is looked at. Most of these groups call them a cabal. There's a generational issue, and I think that both issues are critical, and we can choose to look at them concurrently. But I think for the younger people,
so you would prefer Mohos takes over from his father?
No, that's not the prefer. I think the prefer
because that's the generation question.
There is need for us to collectively rethink and see what does it look like. Because again, you have the younger generation raising concerns about the older generations. And then lastly, I think is to say that this is a timely discussion. It raises different perspectives, but there is definitely need for what Professor looking at things from equity perspective and the nationhood.
And also for emphasis, my party always emphasizes socio-economic issues. Those are the things that we are always fronting. People who don't have jobs, access to hospital services, the infrastructure, poor infrastructure. These are things that we always talk about on top of human rights. Yeah, because of course we face the most human rights because we are trying to fight for the socio-economic issues that we are raising. And we are being beaten for that, you know, and everyone who tries to support that is being curtailed, including people who are funding us now. They are no longer being, I'm told right now that people who are working abroad are going to be taxed just because they know most people in the diaspora are funding the opposition. So anyway, the time is now. Fellow youth, fellow Ugandans, the time is now. The issue is there is a generation, age, is it, you called it age?
A generational clash
There is
or struggle.
there is a generational struggle. We are being led by the old people right now. And the young people are being pushed out and left out. It is time that, I mean, we come and handle these issues. We come and take over, we come and take charge, and make our contribution. They made their contribution in their time. He was, I think, 40 years old when he came into 40 years.
Yeah, about 40.
About 40. Yeah, I
But
mean,
Piero, you people are younger, you got to join them.
yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheilah. I think you may have to invite Professor so that you continue this discourse outside the confines of this platform. Yes, Dr. Tolit, your concluding remarks.
Yeah, yeah. For me, Isaac, I certainly appreciate the fact that the youth and the discussions around youth are becoming an integral part of our national political discourse. Reason being a number of things, but one of them, like we stated right from the beginning, is their sheer numbers, and both biological and fact that the way human nature has existed and persisted, they are the category that still has some time ahead of them. And with the advancement of technology today and the nuances, I mean, look at warfare today, for instance. Who knew that Europe, America, just in a space of a couple of years, would be having obsolete weapons? You know, I just want to bring it to your attention that America, Europe, most of the arsenals they have stocked with so much money with the arrival of AI are now obsolete. Most of these guns you see being given to Ukraine are guns that they're not gifting because they are so generous. They actually want to give them away and create space, you know. So, but the point I'm trying to make is that the real confrontational crisis as it is are in three stages. There's the issue of entrance, arrival and entrance. So the elderly, or to speak, although the dominant force today, to borrow from Professor Ndebesa and avoid the generational speak, is that the dominant force needs to realize that there is a group at the door and they are knocking. The other is that they need to know that there are nuances, things have changed. There's a movement, there's an eruption. And for me, in conclusion, I would really think that one, first of all, it's important to recognize that there is this movement around us, which is causing a tremor, and likely driven by the youth. We are seeing what is happening in Kenya now. Then two is that the youth also, we need to urge them, again, to reflect on what Ndebesa was saying. How do you frame the issues? How you frame the issues is very important for then how you set the agenda for discussion. Because then you can find yourself discussing an agenda that is not impactful, you see. So, and then the tactics. Resistance is one tactic that has been used, but there is also what they call non-violent resistance. Gandhi, for instance, is acclaimed for that. He was very strategic. He knew, for instance, that everybody needs to eat salt in their meal. So when he called for the boycott of salt, you know, he really attacked the core of the issue, because he was attacking the capitalist at that time. So today, for me, I had a discussion both with Sheilah and Tim before we came here. I really think that we need to concentrate, we need to think seriously around legislative lobby. Parliament is an integral part of our lives, because if we think about rule of law, the laws that govern us pass there. So we need to ensure that there are laws that are accommodative and pass the test of time. For instance, you saw the big contention around the UPDF Act. Also, too, we also need to have a modality to test these laws, to test the universality of the laws, but also to be able to scrutinize them even post legislation. Because legislations, in most cases, actually have high implicating consequences, even more than a number of high court rulings. For example, look at this law that came around the express penalty. When this bill was in Parliament, we didn't seem to be concerned around it. So the energy with which we use, the energy we use to elect our leaders, I wish we can sustain that energy to also follow them through. You know, so the mispromise of elections is in that it generates a lot of vigor, sometimes even leads us into crisis, but immediately after, we don't have the willpower to push and understand what is going on. And I think that is also the fallacy of representative democracy. So there is this question of people agency. It should just not only remain in a word. We need to discern it. We need to frame the issues correctly so that then we are able to follow through.
Thank you, Dr. Tolit, for your patriotic guidance and reflections. Many thanks to our viewers for your time and for watching. Much appreciation to the production department for keeping us live on air. Our esteemed viewers, please do engage us on our various social media platforms. We are on X, we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, where you can watch this program and also subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time. Be blessed.